I don't know. We can see.
Right. That would be also.
There's a whole book that he written on just how that roundabout got involved in that process. That's our world.
So
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee. I want to welcome everybody here to this fine August day. Andy, if you could call the roll.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Who do we have from Bullitt County? Right here. Thank you. City of Charlestown. City of Jeffersontown.
Here.
City of Jeffersonville. City of Mount Washington.
Here.
City of New Albany.
Present.
Sure. City of Shepherdsville.
Here.
Hey Arthur, how you doing? City of St. Matthews.
Here.
Clark County.
Here.
Floyd County. IDEM. All right. How about NDOT? See Robin's name. Robin, if you're out there, we see you. Kentucky Division of Air Quality. Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, Central Office. How about KYTC District 5?
Come on.
Kipta is here. KYTC Office of Transportation Delivery. So, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District. Rachel, I saw you unmute or mute. We see you. So Rachel Hamilton's here. Appears to be here. Louisville Metro Economic Development.
Mike King here.
Louisville Metro Planning and Design. Louisville Metro Public Works.
Up here.
Thank you. Regional Airport Authority. Riverport Authority, Louisville Riverport Authority. Oldham County.
Jim Urban here.
Jim Silliman here.
There's Linda on here too. Did I see Linda? I think Linda's on there too. Wow. 3 Oldham County. How about that? Port of Indiana, Jeffersonville. Park Accessibility Advisory Council. Allie here. I don't see Allie on there. Town of Clarksville. Park.
Ida Coleman.
There you go. And then I see Nick Creevy. Hi, Nick, from Floyd County. And then amongst our advisors, I see Federal Highways Kentucky. Hi, Tanya.
Hello.
Federal Highways Indiana. I see Erica. Hi, Erica.
Or afternoon.
Good afternoon. Did I miss anybody? I don't believe I did. We have a great attendance. Thank you all for your attendance. Lately, we've had some great attendance at these meetings. Thank you all for continuing to participate.
Thank you, Andy. Next item on the agenda is the June TTC meeting minutes. Everyone should have received them in your packets. I'll ask if there's any corrections. Seeing as there are no corrections, I entertain a motion for passage of the minutes.
So moved.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
You have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Andy?
Thank you. Speaking of attendance at last month, this is a report based on the June 27th meeting of the TPC. We had 16 out of 18 agencies at that meeting, and I think that's notable. Thank you all for your support of being here at TPC or supporting those that are are part of the KIPTA TPC. At the June meeting, we had Jennifer Kirchner from Kentuckians for Better Transportation. Jennifer came and was our guest speaker and talked about the goings on in Frankfurt over this past session. Some of the items that she and her agency are working on with legislators and transportation stakeholders more generally, I would say. We talked a little bit about our call for projects, more on that today. Cost increases, we gave a little bit of an update of Safe Streets and Roads for All, a little bit more about that today because it's been 2 months. Chris Nicholas did a presentation about a tool that we have. If or when you have questions about where the various urbanized boundaries are that are related to KIPTA, that comes up more often than it should because it's quirky, very quirky, quirkier than ever, I would say. We've got a tool out there for your all's use and the public use, I suppose, too. And she did an administrative modification. That concludes our report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Is there any questions for Andy? Next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is an opportunity for anybody to address this committee. I will ask Greg if there is any online comments or anybody that's in attendance wants to address this committee.
We did not receive any public comments prior to the meeting. I don't see any in the Q&A. If that comes up, we'll bring it up in later business.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is TARC 2025. Andy?
Yes, so today we'll have your vice chairperson, Aida Kopik. She's going to give a presentation to the TTCC, and her colleague Alex Wazorski will give a presentation, similar presentation to the TPC next week. For those that aren't here in person, might want to see it again. It's regarding the route restructuring. As many of y'all know, there's some route restructuring going on or planned for TARC, and they've got a robust process kind of ongoing right now. And so Aida's here to talk a little bit about that and what the future might look like for TARC. So Aida, thanks.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. And I appreciate you inviting TARC to talk to the committee today. So we do have a presentation here, and I also will be looking here for help with moving slides or for a clicker. So,
Actually, put your finger, I'm sorry.
thank you. I appreciate that. No problem. So basically, I am here to talk about TARC 2025 network redesign process. And to start with that, I will provide some background on the TARC financial situation and on the couple of concepts we propose to address the financial fiscal cliff that we are facing, and also how you can get involved in this plan and help TARC to shape out this process and develop the draft plan. So why are we here? As you can see on this slide, for quite some time, we have a growing trend of TARC operating expenses that are growing much faster and higher than TARC operating revenue. So just last year, we identified, and last year and this fiscal year, we identified almost 30 million gap in the TARC operating budget that will need to be addressed. So that probably would hit TARC in the summer of 2026, but we decided to be proactive and address the fiscal cliff situation and our current network system with TARC 2025 process. So, in this situation, TARC is not the only agency that is facing fiscal cliff. Hundreds of other transit agencies nationally are facing shortage of operating budget, and ultimately, we will face the same situation in 2020. However, with the pandemic that we all experienced in a very painful way, especially transit industry, federal administration decided to allocate certain amount of funding to all transit agencies to keep transit running as an essential infrastructure for the community. At that time, TARC received a one-time support from federal funding in amount of the 112 million. And we used this money to cover the gap between operating budget and shortage of revenue that will be exhausted in a year or so. It's basically almost exhausted, like for many other transit agencies. Again, it's a national problem and we are not the only one, but we are proactively looking for some solutions. If there is no additional funding for TARC to cover the gap and the funding expires, we would be facing dramatic reduction in TARC service, revenue hours and revenue miles provided for our community and ridership. And basically that would grow dramatically. The gap between funding and revenue would go dramatically. And we have to decide how to prevent this situation. So network redesign process, TARC 2025 is proactive approach to develop community conversation and develop the network that would provide TARC service in the short term for the next couple of years, and also the growth network opportunities that would adequately serve the community for next 5 to 10 years. We are now in the major community involvement process, community conversation that will help us and provide feedback to develop the draft of this plan. So we are talking to the community about concepts we proposed as part of this network redesign, and I will go through details throughout this presentation. Later this year, December or January, we will develop draft proposals based on the community input, and also have another round of community conversations about the proposal that will ultimately lead to final draft to be presented to the TARC board early next year. So we have here on the slide that the earliest possible implementation is August 2025. However, this is a very ambitious goal, and with the major restructuring of the system like this one, we are trying first to address our budgetary situation and then to serve the community as best as we can, having in mind that a very constrained TARC network might be implemented either late next year or early 2026. Throughout this process, we are asking two main questions to answer throughout this process and with community involvement. So what should TARC do if no additional operating budget is found? And again, we will explore all funding opportunities, but we need to face reality that we may be operating with approximately 50% of our current budget. You probably heard about TARC service reductions late June this year, where we reduced approximately 20% of TARC service system-wide. We preserved and protected our best performing service and where the majority of TARC riders are. However, many local routes experience dramatic service reduction, and buses are coming to the stops much less than they did until the spring 2024. So the second critical question is, would you community support investment to avoid major service reductions and build a better, sustainable transit system for the community? So I will be talking about a couple of concepts with emphasis on concepts that are at this time not proposals, that just two, three very different options that are up for consideration as part of this planning process. So the key decision that we will need to make is if TARC must cut service so that we can fit our current revenues and budget, on which spectrum of the service level we should be. We are considering two different concepts, coverage concept and ridership concept. Coverage concept would be focused on providing service to most area of our community and get transit service close to as many people as we possibly can. The opposite of the coverage concept is ridership concept, where we would provide usable service and high frequency service to many people in the community. However, that service would dramatically reduce TARC service area. It would be focused on ridership where people are, where jobs are, but many areas of the community would have no service at all. So very hard trade-offs that we are facing and need to make decisions on. This is existing TARC network, and existing meaning that is what we, pretty much what we had until June this year. And with that network, we still, in limited budget, we still were able to provide high frequency on the core routes, number 4, 10, 23, and 28. And these 4 routes actually carry 40% or more of average daily users in the TARC system. So the color coded here are in red high frequency routes, then in blue half-hour frequency. In lighter colors are frequency 60 or 90 minutes in our system. So on this slide, you can see that we still cover the majority of the community and stretch beyond the boundaries of James Snyder, also serving our counties in southern Indiana. This is the ridership concept that would basically be half of the level of service budget and revenue hours provided to the community as a trade-off if no additional funding is available. Again, color-coded are in red high-frequency routes operating every 15 minutes, in blue half-hour service for the community. But on this slide, you can see how much area of the community actually has no service at all. Ridership concept would focus on the area where we have high concentration of people and jobs and would be very useful for the area of the community that would be serving. However, outside area of our current service would have no service at all. As you can see, for example, in the Northeast, there would be no service on Westport Road. There would be very little service on Shelbyville Road. And in this case, the service provided would actually generate high ridership and be useful. However, it would be useful to the limited area of the community. This is coverage concept. On the same spectrum of the budget in revenue hours, approximately 50% less of the level of service we had this spring until June this year, with the similar color code in terms of frequency, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. So on this map, we illustrate that the majority of the service area would be covered, and everybody who has service today would still maintain the level of service. However, the frequent service would drop down to 2 routes, and 30-minute service would drop down dramatically as well. The color-coded green routes and light tan color routes would operate at 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or in some cases every 2 hours. So the coverage would provide service. However, the buses would be far apart. That would come to the stops, again, hourly or even less. And ridership, drop in ridership is to be expected, because this service would be covering everybody, but it would not be useful to many people in the community. There would be a long wait at the bus stops. People would probably look for other modes of transportation because extra time would be needed for travel throughout, and our revenue would drop down significantly as well. So we will need to make decisions based on the community input, how to proceed if TARC has only 50% of the budget. So again, the coverage gets some transit service to everybody, as many people as we possibly can, but it's not very useful. And ridership concept would support ridership where people and jobs are, but it would be limited to only certain area of the community. So the third concept, finally, is a bit optimistic proposal. And with that concept, we would basically merge ridership and coverage and provide very useful service to our community. The number of high-frequency routes would grow significantly, as you can see, all in red, many routes operating at half-hour frequency. And also, the coverage service would be provided along with many cross-town connections and transit hubs in the community. However, this network would cost TARC approximately 50 million more in operating budget. So basically, we are in the situation that we would have to recover from the service drop we just had, reducing 20%, plus additional 50 million to provide the service that you can see on this map. That coverage and ridership would generate revenue, would support our ridership, would provide freedom to travel across the community in very reasonable amount of time. As part of the process, because these are concepts, not proposals, not drafts, we will evaluate access to transit, connectivity, and how long people can travel from their destinations in timeframes of 30 minutes, 45, and 60 minutes. So there will be a very detailed analysis of this service on the TARC website and on the project website, TARC 2025. We already have a lot of helpful information for the community to learn and understand about this process and provide their input as well, including survey that will help us to determine the next steps. So public engagement obviously is a key part of this process. And again, our key questions are, what should TARC do and how could TARC look like if we must cut our service by 50%? And also, should the region invest to expand transit instead of reducing level of service that community needs? So we are looking in 3 different directions at 3 different concepts as explained. Coverage concept with a lot of service area and covering everybody. However, the service would be very lean and it would not be useful for the most part of the community. Ridership concept is the opposite on that spectrum, where again, our budget would be 50% of the budget earlier this year. It would be very useful to limited areas of the community with many other people left outside of the service area. And obviously, the key question is, should we as a community invest in more resources and look for funding opportunities for TARC to provide adequate transit system and mobility for us for years to come? So we also need to think what needs would have to be prioritized with the growth concept. When that concept develops into draft proposal, we need to evaluate together with the community input. Are we focusing on the right areas? Should we do more, better? Is this future proposed growth concept meeting the community goals and priorities? So again, we are here in the middle of the community conversations on the concepts developed so far. Later this year, we will be looking at the draft proposal and provide that for the community input and intense community conversation again. These drafts will then be developed into final proposals earlier next year to be presented to TARC board with earliest possible implementation to be determined late next year. With this process, discussion and the information we have available at this time, we would like to know what you all think, stakeholders and the community. As part of the community involvement process, we have stakeholders advisory committee with more than 60 members on this committee. We also have a very long list of the community partners that we are contacting and talking to. And ultimately, we are talking to our ridership as we speak, having pop-up events at the highly used bus stops to present the plan to get direct input for ridership. We also did community survey at the beginning of this process before we developed our existing conditions report. So we are basically trying to reach out as much as we possibly can to everyone touched, involved, or interested in transit, to people who use it, and to people who will help us make decisions on these proposals. So we would like to hear from you, and we are offering multiple channels of communication to talk to us. The best way is basically to keep conversation going, but the survey that is available on our website is very helpful, and it will help us to determine how to allocate our budget between ridership and network. Where is the proper balance? Where TARC should be on this scale, and how to allocate our budget, especially if it's constrained budget. Assuming we find sources of funding for the growth network, there will be more community conversations and prioritizations, but critical situation is to bridge the gap as an interim step, implementing constrained network before we are able to secure funding and go into a growth mode. So with that, I will be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, so we're doing, Felicia's been a big part of this, our comprehensive plan in Fulton County.
Sure.
And one of the questions that comes up is the transit issues.
Of course.
I know at one time, this has been a few years ago, we talked about doing more in Fulton County.
Absolutely.
When I look at your map and I see the ridership, and I know talking to, I spent about 30 years in the banking industry, I talked to bankers, and a lot of the big buildings downtown are empty, probably going to stay empty. Part of that was COVID, people working from home, but then people moving to other places, a little less expensive. Is TARC's concentration on it, and this is 100 years ago, you know, I'm dating myself here, but a lot of the ridership was downtown centric, people riding that to go to work. Is those buildings closed? Is there a thought process to look at, instead of adding routes, maybe changing and not being so centered on downtown Louisville, and maybe look at an Oldham County, a Shelby County, a Bullitt County? I don't know if the ridership's there. I do know that question came up with Felicia. You probably remember this maybe better than I do, but that was one of the topics that has come up. And I know there's other things.
Bullitt County has a lot of employees coming in from
Absolutely.
downtown Louisville. And I think that would be, and I know years ago they had a service out there, it was discontinued, but with the rapid increase of distribution warehouses in Bullitt County, that should be looked at again, definitely.
And other, I know we're looking at other forms of, not just the warehouses anymore.
Yes.
I've got a huge place going into the Brooks area right now that's going to be about 60 high-paying jobs. Probably people outside of that market will be doing that. So I think, I don't know, I'm sure TARC is looking at that, but that is part of our comprehensive plan. Maybe, again, just how we look at TARC has always been, like when I was a kid, it was you ride it to go downtown and then you come back, and maybe looking at it differently. I don't know.
Absolutely. No, you are absolutely right. We should look differently at everything, transportation and mobility, especially after the COVID that impacted our lives and industry and the way we work and live. So.
And that's not changing.
That
I
is
think
not
a lot of
changing.
people thought, okay, they'll all come back, and it really
Exactly.
isn't.
Can I chime in here? And I'm sorry for not being there and present, but I want to echo the same sentiment for Oldham County. Of course, we completed a park and ride lot that we used, we never actually even dedicated it when, certain things happened, which predicated it, but there is growth in Oldham County. There are job creations, more now than ever. We're seeing commercial and industrial interest in Oldham County. So the commuting back and forth and access to jobs is important. So I just want to echo the same thing for Oldham County.
Thank you, Jim. And obviously, we do understand that. And I think, I thank you for this question, because as much as the life has changed, this community developed in many different directions over the past 30, 40, 50 years, as long as TARP is in existence. Our funding model, dates to 1974. And this is the year when we celebrate 50 years of TARP in the situation where we are not able to financially support our system and provide what this community needs. So we together as a community need to first look for sources of funding. We need to look as part of this process. And I should mention the plan is funded with 2 federal grants, areas of persistent poverty and routes restoration program. So a lot has changed before COVID, during COVID, and now. So the community is developing, and that is a great problem to have. We have job growth in different areas, and we also have limited resources. We used to have a 66 Express going to Bullitt County. We used to have 65 Express going all the way up in southern Indiana, and obviously we had 64 going to Oldham County. People traveled on these routes, however, it was very expensive to operate them, and we discontinued them when COVID started and ridership dropped. Your point of all routes, majority of our routes going to downtown, yes, the dynamic has changed, and we are looking into provide many crosstown connections and transit hubs as part of the growth network, primarily. We can look in the same with the constrained network. These are 2 concepts, ridership and coverage, but we will have limited resources to go further out in the community than with the growth network. So we do need to look how people work, where they live, and where they go with their major destinations. I would suggest that we continue this conversation with the Bullitt County and also maybe to provide some information for your comprehensive plan to address that. Basically, that some way of connecting people with jobs in a different way should be addressed in both plans. So as we go through that, we will explore funding opportunities at various levels, and we need to look into connectivity, not just inside Jim Snyder, but also where people from all counties travel.
Especially the contiguous counties. As Jim said, Oldham and Bullitt and Jefferson are always lumped together, but I think Shelby's a big part of that as well.
Absolutely.
And we're even looking, I mean, you can look at Trimble and
absolutely.
It's right. Spencer not so much, but as far as the business side of it, but again, the growth in all of these places. So.
Well, let's continue conversation and maybe have a discussion focused on those plans.
And Keith, for everybody's knowledge, I'll say that TARP literally had the guy that wrote the book on this topic, on the route restructuring, Jared Walker, is part of their consulting team. And so those things we were there, Spencer and I were there. These things were considered, and it's basically a density problem. It's long and short of it.
Exactly. Yeah. As part of the funding opportunities, it's never early to talk about that. It's a long process, but also we constantly try to bridge the gap between employers and people. Maybe some types of public-private partnerships to support access to jobs would be appropriate as part of the process we are working on.
And I think we talked about that pre-COVID with TARP. Yes. We had a lot of the areas in Bullitt have a group of these businesses, and they would have an association. And they would all go in together, and then again, COVID changed a lot of stuff.
Exactly. So, well, I'd be happy to continue conversation with Jim, with you, and anyone else who would like to discuss that topic.
I have this, these 2 concepts related to the micro transit pilot project that's currently being done here in the Jeffersontown area.
Right.
Is that going to be emerging as one of the alternatives that fits into one of these 2 options possibly?
we will definitely consider that. Obviously, we initiated the pilot on micromobility because we thought it would be helpful for the community, especially in the outlying areas and where we have low density. So we have two of those pilots. One is in New Albany in southern Indiana and J-Town. We are evaluating data as we speak, and at the end, obviously, of the pilot process, we will evaluate cost effectiveness, usage, where people went, and all of that. As part of these proposed concepts, micromobility solutions could fill the gap and benefit the people, but we also need to think about the budget and how these projects would be supported. It will be part of consideration then.
I mean, I'm hearing good things from some of our businesses that are participating.
That's great.
And like you said, as employment shifts, you know, the
Yeah.
zone approach and maybe Tark's routes just get you to these zones, and then that public-private concept picks up to get them to that last mile, whatever else. Makes a lot of
critical.
sense.
It's critical. For example, we just were looking just this morning, discussing at the team level, access to GE property. How we help people. We have service there right now, but probably could be better, probably could be more convenient. So there are a lot of options that we have to consider as part of access to jobs, and those questions are right on the target.
Any other
Can I
questions?
ask just one, how many counties do you, I know you all do southern Indiana, and you've done Oldham and Bullitt. What other counties, how far down do you all go as far as TARC is concerned? I mean, what, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm thinking of Hardin County, although that's in, you know, Lincoln Trail, but we're starting to see some growth from what's going on in Hardin County coming into southern Bullitt. I mean, and that's gonna be, if that takes off like they say, and I know there's other thoughts going on with what else is gonna go there, but that would be a prime.
Correct. Obviously, as you said, we served three counties exactly, on the Kentucky side and 2 counties in southern Indiana. I do think that obviously funding is the key. So funding is provided by Jefferson County for running the entire system, and everybody who works in Jefferson County, including residents of Bullitt County, Oldham County, and Indiana counties. So people go across, there are no boundaries, but the actual funding comes from Jefferson County, and I do think that regional connectivity is critical, and that probably goes beyond TARC 2025 boundaries and scope. But addressing the regional connectivity, we are here, regional planning organization. We need to think about what would be the proper level of connectivity, transit solutions, accessibility beyond the TARC system boundaries.
Yeah, Keith, I was gonna say, I think what would be really good to look at in the future, I know we're waiting until like those battery plants actually really up and running, getting some every community campaigns down there, you know, that might be a good solution.
And I do know, you know, a lot of the, like I said, pre-COVID, a lot of the businesses that were looking to get workers were willing to pay for that. So you're looking at, that's a revenue stream that I think has to be put on the table.
Funding model needs to be part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Next item on the agenda is the MPO dedicated cost increases. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Greg, thank you. So implemented cost increase requests today. You may remember that as a part of the project management guidebook that it was recently updated a couple months ago. One of the key questions of the various things that were updated is how early is it appropriate for project sponsors to request cost increases for future fiscal years. And so it was determined through all that discussion that the best time for now would be right now. So it'd be August, a couple months before the beginning of the next fiscal year. And so that's where we are. So an announcement was made to all of those with current MPO dedicated projects to request cost increases for either fiscal 24 phases or fiscal 25 phases. So that announcement was made on July 23rd with a reminder email sent on August 5th. And since that time, GIPTA staff have received 7 MPO cost increase request applications, which we will talk about today. So the first 2 are fiscal year 24 cost increase requests. This first one here comes from Jefferson Town Bicycle Pedestrian Trail Project Phase 2, ID 2084. See the state ID there, it's for their fiscal year 24 construction phase, which currently has about $1.7 million federal program to that construction phase. Due to just increased costs of mostly construction inspection and kind of an estimate as a part of the revisions to the project. Jefferson Town is requesting an additional $400,000 federal to this construction phase plus the match. So that's the first of 7 cost increase requests. The second fiscal year 24 cost increase request we're looking at today is from Oldham County. GIPTA ID 3141, their 4-lane intersection improvement project. They have a fiscal year 24 design phase that's programmed for $188,000. It has already received authorization, but through the review process of that design phase, it was determined that essentially more work is needed to be done. And so Oldham County is requesting an increase of $147,000 plus the match for their design phase so that they can continue on to that in that design process for this project. And so those are the 2 fiscal year 24 cost increase requests that we've received. You can see at the top line here, the total budget remaining for the fiscal year 24 STBG reserve is a little over $1 million. And these requests total to $547,111, which still leaves a carryover balance into fiscal year 25 of $509,971. According to the project management guidebook, this leftover amount, and that's assuming these 2 are approved, of course. But the project management guidebook states that any leftover funds in the STBG cost increase reserve are carried over into next year's STBG cost increase reserve. So they're not carried over into the general fund, but they're carried over into the cost increase set aside specifically. Keep that in mind in a minute. And then I have 4 fiscal year 25 cost increase requests from Louisville Metro, and then 1 cost increase request for fiscal year 25 from KYTC that I will get to at the end. The source from Louisville Metro, GIPTA ID 1662, Shared Use Path Project. They have a fiscal year 24 construction phase that is currently programmed for $3.4 million. And this project, based on cost estimates for construction engineering and construction due to inflation and also some water quality requirements that have been elevated since the previous estimate, that they need to cover certain extra requirements, they're requesting an additional $105,000 federal plus the match for this fiscal. So this is currently programmed as a fiscal 4 construction phase, but the letting will not be until fiscal year 25, to clarify. So that's why I'm looking at these 4 as fiscal 25 cost increase requests, because they will soon need to be phase shifted to fiscal year 25. So currently fiscal year 24, but for this cost increase request discussion, we're considering them as fiscal year 25 phases. So $105,000 for that project. Second Louisville Metro one is one of the Olmsted Parkway projects. This is section 3, script ID 2624. Once again, fiscal year 24 design phase. That's going to be shifted to fiscal year 25. They currently have $100,000 programmed for this design phase, but that estimate did not include KYTC oversight fees. And so they're asking for just another $11,000 plus and they already have a match that is sufficient for even adding that 11,000, the match won't have to change. $11,000 for the design phase for this project. Third one from Louisville Metro is another section of that Olmsted Parkways multi-use path system project. It's this one, section 1, give the ID 2622. This is a fiscal year 24 construction phase that's currently programmed for $2.2 million. This one also estimates updated for CE and CN from inflation, and also some requirements regarding those same kind of water quality requirements I mentioned for the other project, but also there's some updates with how they're handling a couple of railroad crossings associated with the project. And so all of these things add up into needing a little bit more money for this phase. And so they are requesting $550,000 plus match for this construction phase that will soon be phase shifted to fiscal year 25. Then the fourth one is for Cannons Lane, get the ID 2239, a fiscal year 25 construction phase. They had $1 million programmed in fiscal year 23 for construction. That $1 million was authorized, but they have since had a change order. Some additional costs have arisen that they are requesting $250,000 federal for a construction phase that will take place once again in fiscal year 25. So 23 phase for construction already authorized, construction's in the process of being underway, and then just need a little additional money for this project. Okay, so those are the 4 Louisville Metro projects for fiscal year 25. If you look at the top line here, that's the $509,000 is that fiscal year 24 STBG cost increase reserve carryover that I showed you earlier in an earlier slide. Assuming the 2 fiscal year 24 requests are approved today, there's still that carryover that carries over into the fiscal year 25 balance. The initial fiscal year 25 STBG cost increase reserve balance starts at that $4.6 million number. So if you add the carryover from 24 and the initial fiscal year 25 reserve, that gets you to the 5.1 number you see in bullet 3. If all 4 of these Metro fiscal year 25 cost increase requests are approved, then that would take away $916,000 from the total of the fiscal year 25 balance, leaving a little bit over 4.2 million still remaining in the fiscal year 25 cost increase reserve balance for the rest of fiscal year 25. Any questions about any of the stuff that I've talked about so far?
What was the first Metro fiscal 25 project?
Sure, go back. This one here.
Maybe Sawyer?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you.
Any other questions about anything? Yet?
He characterized the changes to everybody's liking. That was one of the projects.
All right, so I mentioned we have 7 cost increase requests. That is the first 6 of them. They are very traditional cost increase requests that staff would recommend approval for. And like I said, if they are all approved by this body today in an action, there'd still be over $4.2 million remaining for the rest of fiscal year 25. So still a lot available. And then we have the 7th cost increase request. That's a little bit more of a special case, I would say. It's, but potentially valuable and worth discussing with you today. And as a preface to this discussion, there does not need to be an action on this item today, but there definitely can be. So if this group hears this request and views it as good, and as a region we want to go forward with it, then there for sure can be an action and we can move forward with it today and bring it to TBC at the end of the month. If there's initial discussion and the group feels like it needs more discussion, then we can continue the discussion for this next cost increase request in September. So what is the special case? So KYTC has a cost increase request for ID 3067. It's the reconnecting West Louisville to the Ohio riverfront. Basically reconnecting across I-60, the I-64 corridor project. And so this project, this KIPT ID, is associated with the planning study that was given SDBG funds in fiscal year 23, $600,000 of KIPTA funds, and is currently underway. So the study is currently happening. They've also authorized the funds, and they're in the middle of the study of determining how to proceed here in the future. And the request right now is requesting a fiscal year 25 preliminary engineering phase of $1 million federal plus the match. So that's what's being requested. The reason it's being requested and why it's a special case is a little bit of a story. So KYTC is, their plan was, and correct me if this is off, was to do the planning study this year that they're doing, and then next year apply for a Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program grant. That is typically a notice of funding opportunity for each year. And so next year around this time, the planning study would have been completed, and they would have then taken that and said, okay, now we want to ask for these funds in next year's notice of funding opportunity. However, FHWA threw a curveball, and instead of having a notice of funding opportunity each year for the upcoming year, they decided a month or 2 months ago-ish to state, okay, for the rest of the IAJA's life, the bill funding where this pilot program exists, we're going to ask for applications for all the rest of the funding. So all the funding for fiscal 24, 25, and 26 in one funding opportunity. Your deadline is September 30th of 2024. So just a couple months away, which obviously messes with KYTC's timeline. They can't apply next year after the planning study is done because there won't be another opportunity to request these funds. And the program is likely to end in fiscal year 26. This particular version of this program anyways. So they are having to, they are still wanting to apply for the funds. So they're going to be trying to submit an application before September 30th for this project. It's around a $30 million project, and it is a 50-50 split. So 50% federal from the grant, and then there's a 50% match. Of the 50% match, it can be matched, 30% of that can be matched with other federal dollars. And so that's what they're trying to get. And so if they were granted it, they would get around $15 million in additional outside federal funds that the region wouldn't be able to have access to. And then there would be some form of strategy to determine how the match would be figured out for that $15 million. But what they're asking for today, as a part of the application process, they get points, or it looks good for the project if you can state that there is a local commitment to the project. And you may ask, well, KIPTA funded a planning study. How come that isn't local commitment? My understanding from KYTC's grant folks is that a planning study is not an implementation phase and therefore does not count towards local commitment to a project. A PE phase would count as implementation dollars and would help their application to potentially be able to get the 15 million outside federal money from this program. So hence they're requesting that today. Normally KIPTA staff would say, okay, that's great, KYTC, but that's a request that comes from the call for projects process that we're doing right now, because it's really not an existing project that you're having a cost increase for. It's a new phase for a new project. And so this would normally be a call for projects request. However, they have the September 30th deadline, and so they can't wait for that if they're going to get these implementation dollars to be able to put in their application. And so while it wouldn't be a traditional use of the cost increase reserve budget, it could be worth it to this group and to the TPC as a consideration of how to use the funds in an effort to get $15 million in the future into the region for a potentially very beneficial project. And I don't know if KYTC, if you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on what I've said, and also what exactly are you hoping to do with the project?
Oh, thanks for the summary. It almost sounds like you know more about our project than I know. And I've been working on it for like a year, so, or more, maybe two, but that's really great. And yeah, the money situation is a little bit unusual. Only thing I would mention is that, you know, the SLO program did fund a planning phase, and this is the next subsequent phase, design. However, it's a subsection, just some high priority elements of within that planning area that we recognize through existing conditions analysis and through a publicly approved community community planning documents. Number one, the Portland Community Study, which is adopted by Metro. It says these improvements that we want to do are really focus area improvements that we should probably do and do first. So the bottom line is, yeah, it's kind of a new project because the planning study looks at a larger area, and we're going to do that over the next year. But in order to apply for this grant money, we gotta really focus in on a high priority area for actual design and construction, and we need to, as a local area, try to show financial commitment. So by September 30th, our hope is that we'd have some SLO preliminary engineering dollars in the amount of $1 million that we could say this is our local commitment here, and we're going to look for other local commitments like other local ways to match the project locally and other ways to invest local dollars. But the bottom line is this is an opportunity for us to apply in a very crunched timeline that we never expected, and to try and get a $30 million project in the West End using funds that never really existed before. Reconnecting Communities is a completely new program. We always hear people saying the interstate bisected our community and it wrecked our community connections. And this is the only money we've ever heard of in the history of federal highways that kind of reconnects communities. The West End is a great place to try and do that. And this project, we thought we'd have a year to scope it and apply for money, but that changed. So we only have until September 30th. The neat thing is that the KIPTA region is already supportive of it. We feel like the community is supportive of it because we have a adopted community plan that has all these improvements in it. And so we think it's a good project, and we think it's a great way to get leverage local dollars to get more dollars into the community in a way that we've never been able to before. You know, reconnecting the West Louisville to the riverfront, which is a really cool concept, and everybody that we have shared that with, including our leadership, is generally supportive of doing something like this. So it's an opportunity to do something we've never been able to do, but would like to do if we have support. Larry, did I miss anything?
No, it's just it's a transformative project that is really not on the books. It's not been in the long range plan to make these improvements, but they are things that the community has wanted since the first iteration of that Portland neighborhood plan in 1983. After the community had been divided by the flood wall and the railroad and the interstate. You know, we're not the only barrier, but we're looking at a economically disadvantaged neighborhood, a transportation disadvantaged neighborhood, and a lot of potential benefit for a lot of people.
One thing I'll add is it's adjacent to the waterfront park, expanded waterfront park.
Yeah, we purposely, the east boundary of our study is at the boundary of the park.
And then it's not too far from Kenai Bridge, whatever might happen there someday too.
It extends all the way to Shawnee Park. The study, not the focus, not what we're looking at today, but this focus area, these are projects that are documented, in a lot of different ways. I mean, our data collection has brought these particular projects to the top. And then when we go back historically, they're in all of the planning documents that went before, so.
$1 million gets you to the PE to further advance this project. And then if you're successful in getting the 15 with the other 15 match, that will then hopefully fund the project. Is that?
This portion of the entire project,
Of that
yes,
project,
yes. And this is a subset that basically goes from 18th to 28th Street. So it would go, if you're familiar with the area at all, the first overpass at 19th Street, pedestrian overpass, to the entrance to the Locks Dam and Landon Park. Basically, that segment is the priority section, plus 22nd Street from Bank to the interstate, Northwestern Parkway.
And we didn't really talk about the nature of these improvements. These are basically improvements we would do on interstate, generally on interstate and state road right of way. And for example, we would want to replace 2 existing pedestrian overpasses and convert them to much more modern bicycle and pedestrian overpasses, and maybe even make them like gateway overpasses that say, hey, welcome to Kentucky, welcome to Portland, because this is the west entrance to the state of Kentucky, as well as the city of Louisville and Portland and everything. Some other improvements we were talking about is like really cleaning up making better multimodal and safer connections under and through the 22nd Street interchange, so that people have better access on and off of the interstate, but also kids going to the ball practice at Landon Park on the other side of the interstate can walk safely underneath the interchange and to the park from their neighborhood in Portland. And some of the other stuff would be, the right of way along there is really in bad shape. The right of way fences are all knocked down. There's overgrown bushes and sketchy things. Our hope is that this project would clean a lot of that up and just give this a section of interstate a much better, nicer appearance. And say
back to the expansion of the little waterfront too. Yeah,
that's the intent. We have like I say, our initial, like Larry said, our initial stuff kind of centers around those 2 existing ped overpasses and the 22nd Street. But our larger planning study is going to look at connected to waterfront development and Portland Wolf Park and all these other things. But that's going to take longer to go through the planning process and get that all ironed out. Like this little list of priority improvements I mentioned, we feel like we could advance a design and construction project pretty quick with that stuff, but in the background, complete the planning study and have a plan for everywhere else too.
So that's all the information that I have right now for the cost increase requests. The options for the TTCC right now is there's the 6 first cost increase requests I discussed. Can vote to approve or not approve those. And then there's the KYTC one. Once again, can vote to approve or not approve, or can decide to table that discussion for next time. Up to you on how you'd like to handle those cost increase requests.
Thank you, Brady. That's been Brady kindly discussed the options before this committee. I would entertain a motion to approve all these cost increases, if that's so the will of this committee. So,
Including the one.
including the.
I would say
Move for motion. Do I have a second? There is a second. Is there any further discussion on these cost increase proposals? None online, I can't see. Okay. Being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, and Brady. Next item is a call for projects. Brady.
most of this information, as Greg's pulling up the PowerPoint here, has already been shared in some form. The call for projects for 2024 opened on August 1st and the application period runs through October 31st. So we're currently in the application period. On August 31st, I also sent out a call for projects 2024 primer document, essentially, that has a whole bunch of the information you might need and several links to eligibility information for the various sources from FHWA and information about the project applications to apply for the golf project. So that information is very similar to what I have in your packet right now for this agenda item. So if you haven't seen the primer document in my email or through the packet that you're received today, let me know and I can get that information to you so you have something written. I'm just going to go through a couple things just as a reminder. I've covered most of this already, but just as another reminder, Indiana has 6 funding sources that we have suballocated, and then Kentucky has 3 that we get to work with. In Indiana, in my June presentation, the initial announcement of the golf projects, you may remember that in fiscal year 27, this was kind of an asterisk number. It was lower than this because we weren't sure about the status of an existing project, whether it would use funds in fiscal 27 or not. Since June, we've determined that that particular phase will not use funds in fiscal year 27. So that $2.4 million number is higher than it was a couple months ago. We still have that question for fiscal year 28, so that you see $524,000 in fiscal year 28, depending on the status of an existing project that we're getting more information on here in the next couple of months. That number could increase to all the way up to $3.8 million available in fiscal year 28 in our Indiana communities. Also of note, fiscal year 25, 819,000, because Indiana doesn't have a carryover balance. We need to program that now and not later. So there'll be a discussion at the next quarterly meeting in Indiana in a couple of weeks of how best to divvy up the $819,000 in fiscal year 25 to program that as soon as we can. And so based on the recommendations from that quarterly meeting, those recommendations will be brought to the TTCC next month. In Kentucky, this is the SDBG numbers. There's a total availability of over $37 million. That's primarily for entirely for fiscal year 28 and fiscal year 29 funds. You can see these numbers here are the projected ending carryover balances, assuming all projects that are currently programmed are authorized. So you can see by the end of fiscal year 27, we're actually over programmed almost $3 million, which is totally safe assumption to make. But in terms of over programming a little bit, but what it does mean is that there's not really any money available to program new phases or cost increases through the golf projects until fiscal year 28 for SDBG funds specifically. And then we also have TA funds in Kentucky. The same thing applies here, but the total number is $7.1 million available through fiscal year 29. And CRP is $6.3 million as well. A little more flexibility with CRP and TA than there is with SDBG right now. But you can see in both of those that the highest numbers of funding available are still in 28 and 29 because those have not had any programming as of today. After all the applications are had, we will form a TCCC working group who will help determine with a bunch of other information and project scores and lists of priorities and a lot of things, which projects to fund. That group will have to consider how much funding are we going to give towards existing projects that need cost increases or new phases or whatever, and how much money should we give to new projects that don't have any funding. So yes, we have a lot of money available, but in reality, a lot of that money is still going to have to go to existing projects, most likely. So there'll have to be a decision made from that working group on how that's divvied up. Another couple notes, no more than 5% of the annual allocation of SDBG funds shall be used for planning studies in a given year specifically. So that's a cap for planning studies for the SDBG program. And the most a single phase can receive in Kentucky from the SDBG program is 50% of the adjusted annual allocation. Adjusted annual allocation meaning the amount of money after we lock off 20% for the cost increase reserve. And that number is going to be around $9 million is 50% because the adjusted annual allocation is about 18 million-ish. So those are things to know. A couple other quick notes. This is the page on our KIPTA transportation portal where you will apply for MPO dedicated funding for this call for projects. There's two applications, but you only have to submit one application per project. And so which application, either the full or the expedited, you will fill out is depending on what type of project you're submitting. So if you have a project that is new to the TIP or MTP, hasn't had new to the TIP or MTP, it's a new project, you're going to need to submit a full project application because that project needs to be scored through our MTP scoring system. Or if you have an existing project that is undergoing substantive changes to design, concept, location, or scope, they would also need that project within the rescored, which means you need to resubmit the additional information that's in the full project application. So full project application for new projects or projects with substantive changes that are existing. There is a video, you can click on that link, the blue link there, that's like a 10-minute video where I go through the application and I give you some highlights of things that information you may want to know. If you have any questions during the application process, though, feel free to call me or email me as well, that's fine. You can encourage that. And then there's the expedited project application. This is for existing MPO dedicated projects with minor changes or you're just proposing funding updates. So nothing's changing about the project. The description of the project isn't changing, the scope isn't changing, any of that. It's just a funding request for an existing project or funding, some sort of funding change. Then you can use the expedited project application, which is faster, it's expedited, it's going to take less time to fill out. And there's also a separate video that goes through the expedited project application. Once again, that's about 10 minutes. I encourage you to take a look at that. If you have an existing MPO dedicated project that is no changes are happening, you're not requesting funds, nothing is changing about it, you don't need to submit anything. We're just going to assume that that is going to carry over to the next tip. Any questions about the call for projects right now?
We encourage everybody to go ahead and sooner rather than later put your projects in there. It's not first come, first served, to be clear, but to the extent that might need help on this or that, better now or in the next few weeks than late October when undoubtedly there will be lots of applications.
Any other questions for Brady? Great, thanks, Brady. Next item on the agenda is the Indiana quarterly meeting recap. Brady.
The last one, you'll get rather eager. That's Marshall. Okay. Yes, I've got the wrong heading. Okay. Indiana June quarterly meeting. So we had a meeting on June 20th. This is just a little recap of what happened in that meeting in June, and then also how things went in fiscal year 24 in Indiana. It'll take 5 minutes on this. Had the meeting on June 20th. We reviewed project delivery status in fiscal year 24. Had an initial discussion of that $819,000 that I mentioned that we're going to talk about in the next quarterly meeting and make decisions on how to fund projects with that money. So we had an initial discussion of that. That will be concluded next month, hopefully. And then we talked about amendment 7 and the golf project as well. Fiscal year 24 in Indiana, we received a sub-allocation, a combined sum allocation from all the 6 funding sources of almost $6 million. Is a $5.9 million number there. By the end of the fiscal year, we had $4.4 million programmed, and I'll explain why that number isn't 5.9 in just a minute, but we obligated $3.7 million in fiscal year 24. That's an obligation rate of about 84%, which is pretty good. We spent most of the MPO dedicated money that we programmed in Indiana last year. The reasons why those numbers are a little different this year is twofold. One, NDOT offered to replace Floyd County's Charlestown Road project that was previously programmed with about $1.1 million of CMAQ MPO funds. They replaced that with this $3.6 million of state funds, of HSIP funds. And so that's probably the biggest reason that we had less programmed than available, is because some of it was programmed, but it was swapped with state funds. NDOT also offered to fund Clarksville's Riverside Drive project, which lost a lot of its funding in the CRISA crisis years ago. They provided that project $4.8 million of free funds, and the kind of deal in return is that NDOT would provide us with all of that $4.8 million, and KIPTA would give back to NDOT any funding that was unallocated at the end of the fiscal year, which includes the CMAQ dollars above the 1.1 million. It includes the one project phase that wasn't authorized in 24, and it includes a couple $100,000 that was never programmed. That ends up looking like this. So we originally had the completed sub-allocation of just under $6 million is what we received originally. We obligated, including these NDOT deals for projects, obligated over $12 million in fiscal year 24, and then gave NDOT back about $2.1 million because we didn't obligate those funds. So in net, we have a net gain of $10 million, I guess. A net gain maybe of $6 million, but the amount we obligated minus the amount we sent back to NDOT equals about $10 million. So that's a great win for the Southern Indiana region. We got a lot more money into the region than we would have otherwise been able to under normal circumstances. And then once again, we have that fiscal year 25 funding remaining that will be discussed in a couple weeks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brady. Any other questions for Brady? Great. Next item on the agenda is the Safe Streets and Roads for All. Spencer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Screen. All right, just gonna kind of give a quick SS4A update and a few other things to leave you guys with. Kind of done a lot with SS4A because we, since our last meeting, since it was mid-June. The first big thing was the second quarterly stakeholder meeting. That meeting, we talked a lot about the schedule, kind of where they're at and where they're still at right now, which is the data processing and analysis section. And the consulting team, HDR, Palmer, and TSW, gave us like a 40,000 foot view of the data dashboard they're making in Microsoft Power BI. That was, I think, the coolest part, and I think most people would agree. And they kind of were setting up the next part, which was the one-on-one stakeholder meetings. So the one-on-one stakeholder meetings, the first meeting took place on July 10th. The next meetings took place between July 20th and 25th. We had 16 one-on-one stakeholder meetings that were an hour apiece across 3 different days. So the first day was Monday, I think it was the 20th. We met in Indiana. Thank you to Jeffersonville, by the way, for letting us use their conference room in their city hall. This basically consisted of 15 minutes of kind of a quick overview of what SS4A is and kind of where we're at on the schedule. 30 minutes of a deep dive into the data for each individual jurisdiction and just making sure that the data itself looked accurate and kind of matches where a lot of the local jurisdictions perceive their crashes. Took a lot of questions, clarified a lot of different things about the data itself, and then kind of ended with a 15 minutes, like little kind of almost like homework assignment on the next step, which kind of leads me to the next part. Kind of the things that everyone, that should be on everyone's mind here, and that were at those meetings. The first thing would be the resolutions. Amy Williams from TSW should have sent everyone that attended those meetings or our primary contact for SS4A, kind of like a batch of documents, and one of those were the draft resolutions that they used in Danville and E-Town. So I think to kind of stay on schedule, they were hoping that each of the 16 jurisdictions could adopt the resolution, and that's the Vision Zero statement. You know, and that's by sometime in November, probably, I'm assuming, you know, mid into November. Get those Vision Zero statements, you know, that passed, however you guys see fit. And then, but even sooner than that is hosting your local safety action committee. Those are basically kind of taking what we did at those one-on-one meetings and taking it to each of your local jurisdictions, maybe inviting, you know, a few more people. So at the one-on-one meetings, we had, you know, more than just planners and engineers and elected officials. They were fire chiefs, police chiefs, EMS, maintenance crews, just kind of anybody that knows your all's road systems and knows where all the issues are, where crashes are. And me and Nick actually attended one in Shelby County yesterday. And, you know, I like these meetings because, you know, we talk about a lot of the SS4A stuff, which has been talked about a lot repeatedly, but it also kind of brings in, you know, other issues that aren't necessarily SS4A related, but gets all those people in the same room to kind of talk about that kind of stuff. So like one of the things in Shelby County we talked about is when they have a wreck, like where should they redirect traffic? You know, sometimes it gets redirected on small county roads when it should be redirected onto US 60, for example. So even though that's not necessarily a solution that SS4A is gonna solve, it's still nice getting everyone in the room. And Andy's repeated this a few different times. You know, we hope that kind of lives on from this process. You know, those meetings live on, you know, a couple times a year hosting a local safety action committee meeting and just getting all those safety focused people in the same room to talk about all the important safety things, you know, to make our roads better for everybody. And that kind of leads me into the last part. So in the memo, there's a link here, and then I also sent out this little slip of paper that they should have sent you all digitally, which is this version, but also they gave out little, you know, print versions. But takes you to the social pinpoint website, which is right here. This is basically the comment map, kind of like the Kidja comment map. I like this website a lot because it works really well on cell phones too, where I know sometimes our comment map doesn't always work the best. So, you know, it's way easier to use on PC. This works well, you know, via both. You can see all the comments. I think, what they say yesterday, Andy? We have like over 600 right now.
I think that's right.
It runs till the first week of September. We could make it run a little longer if we want to. We can request that from the consultant team, but you can see a little shout out to Shelby County, but they probably have like the most per capita comments. So you can see as you zoom in, more things pop up. It kind of consolidates them when you zoom out. So sometimes it doesn't quite paint the best picture, but
They did a fantastic job getting word out.
oh yeah, they posted it on a lot of their social media. Their magistrates have posted it. The mayor, I know he said yesterday, the mayor of Shelbyville, he's posted it a few times. But essentially, you know, I'll go in here. I'll go over here.
While he's hunting for that, remember, we've got this, you know, deep dive into the hard data, you know, and those that were at that one-on-one, y'all saw it. But this is kind of like I equate it to the boosting of the shift process, right? This is where you say, you know what, the data is something, we don't want to ignore it, but over here matters too, and pay attention over here. And so these comments are critical mass comments, the consultant team's going to take and work those in. So it's important. Great reason to share that with your communities.
Yeah. So I just clicked on one. This is in J-Town, but this is the comment somebody put. you know, so people would go in and like and dislike them, which I think is really important, because sometimes I think people go, oh, there's already a comment in that spot, I don't need to say anything. And I think the more they get said in the same spot, the more impactful it is. So you'll see some of them have 7, 8, 9 likes, and some of them have some dislikes. You know, you could actually start a discussion and you know, be like, you know what, I disagree or I agree. Somebody from Oldham County, somebody from their maintenance direction came up with a really good idea. He was like, some of these I want to go in, like there was a comment at an intersection. He was like, actually, we already have the fix on the way. You know, so he wanted to get their comment back. Hey, we're planning on fixing this in November 2024. So I thought that was a really good idea. So that's a way that you guys could, you know, almost interact with your communities. But you know, you just click this add spot button up here, and you can either add a spot. So I'll just kind of test one out real quick. So you can like place a marker here, and then you type out your comment. The only thing required is that you, of course, type a comment and then check this little box. You can put your email, you don't have to. You can put your name and zip code, you don't have to. And then once you add, that's when it kind of pops up, you know, like this, where someone can interact with it. And there's also this segment tool, which I thought was pretty cool. So you can actually be like, this whole area is like, you know, a problem, and, you know, add your comment that way. So I thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, so that right now, this is probably the most important thing. And then hosting your safety action committee meeting before, like by the end of this month. I know a few places have already either scheduled theirs or hosted it, like yesterday in Shelby County. I'm not missing any important details about the map. You know, any comments are welcome. I mean, you know, I think a lot of people always want to put negative things. You know, you could put positive things too. Like a positive for me would be, I like this roundabout down here on Smyrna and Cooper Chapel. You know, you could say, add more of these, or, you know, of course you could put things like, you know, just because you don't live in a jurisdiction, you could still put comments anywhere you want. You know, you might drive from Spencer County to J-Town Beach and be like, there needs to be a crosswalk there, I can't get across. So, you know, put one there. I mean, it's a regional plan and it's 16 individual plans. So I know, you know, nobody stays cooped up at just one of these places. So it's good to, because I got, you know, I can take the comments in every place, probably. You know, everybody in this room probably did. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all I have. Maybe, you know, keep adding comments. I think we need a little bit more. We have one in Spencer County way over here in the corner. You know, we need a little more comments from not that they're in the room right now, but from some of the rural places, and then like a little bit more from like rural Clark County. But everywhere, we've gotten a lot of comments so far. And this is 600 comments in just a couple of weeks. Is really good turnout. I think that's all I pretty much have. And then you know, the safety, get your safety action plan meeting, your local one scheduled, you know, soon, because it's coming up. We only got a couple weeks left.
If you need any help with that, please reach out to Spencer or myself.
Yeah, like I said, me and Nick attended Shelby County yesterday. Nick helped kind of drive, but you know, after the first 10 minutes, it just kind of, you know, we talked about that they gave out maps. There was like a meeting in a box that TSW sent out, so it kind of had some little diagrams and some little activities, like places to take notes, and then a bunch of different maps, you know, crash maps for pedestrians, bikes, all crashes in that 5-year period. We basically pulled the data out of that dashboard that isn't public, you know, and made it more, like made it easier to use for the public internet at those meetings, especially. So, you know, we can help host those. We can, you know, help you get the materials, or, you know, there's a lot of questions about SS4A, but there were a lot of questions about other things, like, you know, isn't there a project going on there? You know, a lot of times we might know that information, or we definitely know somebody that knows. You know, you can always email Tom Hall and say, hey, Tom, what's going on right here? So please reach out if you guys have any questions, or if you didn't get any materials and you need them, or if you're not on that list of, I think every place has up to 3 kind of contacts for SS4A. If you just want the material, I can send you those too. So
Thank you, Spencer. Any other questions for Spencer? And then next item on the agenda is other business.
Couple items. One, I want to recognize a few people that we didn't catch during the roll call. Eric Wise is the new Executive Director of the Clark County Planning Commission. I think he was on here earlier, so I'll recognize him. Larry Summers from New Albany. Join us, Larry. Kathy McCallum from NDOT. Thank you, Kathy. Joe Ender, Deputy Judge of Oldham County. So we had a full house from Oldham County. I think we had all 4 members from Oldham County here today. And then Bruce Bone from TARP. So thank you all for joining us here today. Another reminder, Brady was talking about the Culver projects earlier. Keep a reminder that Amendment 7 is scheduled to be approved next month. So expect to hear from us next month about Amendment 7. We had our interagency consultation call regarding air quality analysis there. We had that just yesterday. So that's well on its way. Amendment 7 is. And then last but certainly not least, I hope he's still here. I don't see him. He's not here, is he? So Jim Silliman and Joe Ender and Belinda, you'll have to express our sentiments from KIPTA. Today is very likely, at least in official capacity, will be Jim Urban's last TTCC meeting. Jim Urban is retiring. And so we wanted to recognize Jim. And so he was here today, as you all saw, and he chimed in during the TARP conversation. And I don't have to brag too much about it because I think everybody at the table and outside the table even recognizes that to this TTCC, nobody's been more influential and had a better feel for either what KIPTA staff are talking about. We're up here running our mouths, and he sometimes has to interpret it for the rest of you guys. And nobody's been a better friend to KIPTA, I think, over the years than Jim Urban has. And so I want to recognize him here in front of the TTCC. And KIPTA staff have a card for him. We'll make sure he gets it at some point real soon. So I want to recognize Jim Urban. So Jim Silman, you got anything else you wanted to say about that or anything?
No, unfortunately, he had to leave. Apparently, I would have said the same thing. In the 5.5 years that I've been involved with TTCC, he's shown his leadership and involvement and activity, and I'm sure he knows you're recognizing him, but we'll make sure he gets the message.
Yeah, it goes way back. I think Larry would agree with that. It's been, there's nobody that's been more consistent. We've got a lot of consistent folks here, including our chairman and Aida and Keith and Tom and others. And we appreciate all your support through the years. And Jim's on the Mount Rushmore of TTCC for certain.
So I've been with the city of Georgetown for 21 years, and I've known him for at least 21 of those years in this capacity here, being a sponsor and with KIPTA. So worked well with him over the years in a lot of his past capacities. So do wish him the best, and in his spirit, I want to have him continue on to be a part of some of our advisory roles maybe. So.
I would hope so. I would love that.
Yeah. Do you have any other?
I do. That concludes my report. So
the spirit of Jim, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye, and no opposition. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
thank you all.